Thank you for joining us for our song and story today. We are excited to have you back, and we have a special program planned. Don't we, Nathaniel? So this morning we have a song about a smile. It isn't any trouble just to S-M-I-L-E. It isn't any trouble just to S-M-I-L-E. So smile when you're in trouble. It will vanish like a bubble if you only take the trouble just to S-M-I-L-E. That's right. It isn't any trouble just to S-M-I-L-E. It isn't any trouble just to S-M-I-L-E. So if you smile when you're in trouble, it will vanish like a bubble if you'll only take the trouble to S-M-I-L-E. Isn't any trouble to S-M-I-L-E. The story we wanted to share with you today is called The Olden Days by Joe Matthew. What was it like in the olden days? About 150 years ago, a New England village was a small, quiet place. There were no cars or trucks on its streets and no airplanes flying overhead. People rode from place to place on horseback or in horse-drawn buggies. The village shops stood close together around the common pasture, where people could leave their horses and other animals to graze. The general store was a lively shop. It stocked many things the villagers needed. There were buckets and barrels, crockery and cloth, shovels and lanterns, spices and soap. People often traded for things instead of paying for them with money. They brought in their own homemade goods or homegrown vegetables and eggs. When the wooden wheels were in need of repair, they were brought to the wheelwright's shop. The wheelwright made and fixed wooden wagon wheels for all the wagons and buggies in the village. To make a wheel, the wheelwright hammered wooden spokes into the holes in the hub, the center of the wheel. Next, he fitted sections of the wooden wheels around the spokes. Finally, he cut a larger hole in the center of the hub so the wheel would fit perfectly on the wagon's axle. The blacksmith was a very strong man, and he had an important job. He kept the fire burning all day long to heat the iron he used to make things. He pumped the big bellows to keep the fire hot. Using a hammer and an anvil, he shaped the hot pieces of metal into hinges, chains, hooks, kettles, nails, tools, and horseshoes. The blacksmith also nailed the horseshoes onto the horse's hoofs. Iron shoes protect the hoofs. The blacksmith made sure that the shoes fit just right. Then the horse could walk easily and without pain. Farmers brought their dried corn and other grains to the grist mill. There it was ground into flour or meal for bread, cakes, biscuits, and pies. The grist mill stood beside a stream which provided water power to turn the big water wheel. The water wheel turned the large millstone inside of the mill. The miller measured all the grain that was brought in. Then it was sent upstairs on a conveyor and stored until it was ground. It came back down through a chute which emptied into a wooden hopper. The grain trickled down between the spinning stones. It was crushed into flour. What a racket the millstone made. That's how they made flour back in the olden days, Nathaniel. Isn't that neat? The carpenter's workshop was a busy place. The master carpenter made bedposts and legs for chairs and tables on a machine called a lathe. Hey, Droodlebug, are you playing with a tool, huh? We're talking about tools. His young apprentice turned the crank on the big wheel that ran the lathe. While the apprentice worked, he watched carefully so he could learn the craft. Carpenters made most of their own tools in the olden days. Many of them were much like the hand tools we use today. There was no electric machines for making furniture. A chair might take the carpenter many hours of hard work, but he always took great care, and he could be proud of every piece he made. All the neighbors pitched in to help build a barn in the olden days. Some men cut down trees and some cut them into beams and boards. Some laid the boards down to make the floor. Others fitted and pounded the big beams together on the ground to make the barn's frame. What are they using to pull it up, Nathaniel? Can you see all those ropes and stuff that they're using? And they're using people because they didn't have excavators and cranes and stuff like that back in the olden days. When the heavy sections of frame were finished, the men pushed them into place with long wooden poles called pikes. They used wooden pegs instead of nails to hold the frame together. A barn raising was a big event, and the women prepared a huge feast. Everyone was tired at the end of the day, but they had had a good time. In the olden days, the kitchen was the main room of the house. Its big fireplace was used for cooking as well as heating. Women carried their own firewood to keep the fire going all day. They cooked delicious meals in heavy iron pots and kettles. They grew their own vegetables and raised their own animals for meat. They made cider with apples from their own trees. Girls helped their mothers with all the chores. What a hot and tiring job, turning the roast over the fire for hours. The beehive oven was a part of the fireplace. Fresh bread was baked in it every day. Nathaniel, do you like fresh bread?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty good. But we have it a lot easier now where we can make fresh bread. Most of the people were farmers in the olden days, and they made almost everything they needed. Farmers who raised sheep sheared their wool off every year to make cloth. After the wool was washed, it was carded between two spiked boards to make it smooth. Then it was twisted into long strands of yarn on the spinning wheel. Afterwards, it was colored with dyes made from leaves, berries, or bark. It took lots of practice to learn how to weave on the big loom.
Tractors back in the olden days.
They didn't have tractors, you're right.
Yeah.
Dyed yarn was woven into cloths for beautiful blankets, winter smocks, shawls, coats, and other clothing. In the olden days, women made clothes for everyone in the family. People didn't drink much milk in the olden days. There was no refrigerators to keep it fresh and cold. Instead, women and girls used milk to make butter in the butter churn. They also made cheese by separating the solid part of the milk, the curds, from the liquid part called the whey. Butter and cheese were easier to store without spoiling than milk. There were no light bulbs in the olden days. People lit their home with candles. Look, Nathaniel, they're making candles here. Women made their own candles by dipping string wicks into melted animal fat over and over again. Some women made home medicine by crushing and mixing herbs they had grown in their gardens. The village schoolhouse had only one room, and one schoolmaster taught all the children. They learned how to read, write, and count. There were only a few books, and they were expensive. Most students learned their numbers and alphabet from a horn book. It was a board protected from wear by a thin, clear sheet of horn. The horn covered a piece of paper with the letters and numbers printed on it. Children practiced writing with chalk on small black slates. The last snow of the winter was called the sugar snow. That was the season for making maple sugar. The men made holes in the maple trees and put a spout in each hole. They hung up buckets to catch the sap that dripped out. The sap was boiled in a large iron pot to make maple syrup. When they boiled off all the liquid, they got maple sugar. Daniel, do you like maple syrup?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
It's kind of hot.
In the olden days, there were no furnaces to keep the houses snug and warm. At bedtime, mothers warmed the cold sheets with a bed warmer filled with hot coals from the fireplace. The children were tucked into their trundle bed, which pulled out from under their parents' bed. And that's what life was like in the olden days. The olden days. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed our song and story today. We'll see you next time. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. Come back again, we'll see you soon. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. It is always busy at the Barnes home. Have a great day.